Hey guys, so I kind of wanted to share the process I use when I'm starting to develop a rifle and loads for that rifle. And I've done it different ways over the years, but this is kind of one of the ways that I like the most. So this is tied into our Project Big 7 and how I'm kind of trying to figure out what I want to do with the load development for this Tikka T3X. And I like to think about it in different bullet weights and kind of look at how they're going to perform, generally speaking, in terms of ballistics. What kind of trajectory can I get with different bullet weights? What can I expect? Energy, those kinds of things. So what I like to do is just take a ballistic calculator, and this is from Hornady, and I'll run some scenarios. So I'm just going to walk you through some I just set up here for the Big 7. So the first one I'm looking at is a 140 grain bullet, okay? And I used a Nosler AccuBond for this analysis, and that has a 0.485 ballistic coefficients. Why a Nosler AccuBond? Because the velocities are pretty high with this bullet in the Big 7, and I want it to be a tough bullet that can handle higher impact velocities. That doesn't mean I might not work up loads with something different with cup and core, but just kind of trying to be realistic here about what bullet I would use on game in this weight. So all these other inputs up here, you'll see they'll be equal. So we're apples to apples. They'll be equal for the 3 different scenarios that I've run here. So here's the output for the 140. Okay, and I set these all up with a 250 yard zero. So we can probably reach 3250 with a 24-inch barrel. I think we can get right there. Starting out at the muzzle at almost 3300. Okay, carrying plenty of energy for elk all the way to 500. And you guys that know me know I wouldn't shoot an elk at 500, so probably 400 max. So I've got more than enough energy with this load, which is great. Retain velocity downrange, and this is why I want to use an AccuBond. You're still pushing 2800 at 300 yards. And I'd feel better with a bonded bullet at that type of impact velocity. Certainly up here at 200 yards, almost 3,000 feet per second still, I want a bonded bullet. And then let's move over here to trajectory. Again, zeroing at 250. You can see it's like a laser to 300. You would just hold dead on an elk, deer, zip it. Out at 400, you've got about a foot of drop. And for the way I hunt, which is without BDC reticles or any dialing or anything like that, this also gives me a very easy hold knowledge for deer at 400. If you held on the top of their back and hit a foot low, you're going to be heavy in the vitals. With elk, you wouldn't even want to be on the top of their back, maybe just at the top third of their body, and you're going to hammer the vitals there as well. Again, I wouldn't shoot to 400 or 500, but it is interesting to note the performance there. So let's move to the next one, which is 160 grain load. And this one I picked is also a Nosler AccuBond 0.531. This is where I would start to consider a cup and core bullet. Velocities are dropping off a lot more. I've used the Hornady ELDX in the 162 and had great performance on game out of the Big 7. So there's some flexibility there, but this one now, I think we can get 3,000 at the muzzle, okay? Lots of energy, it's 3,200, and we're carrying plenty of energy to 400. So it's interesting, we're at about 2,100 foot-pounds. If we go back to the 140, we were at about 2,100. So that's worth noting, okay? The better BC probably helps out with that. And look at these trajectories, okay? Look at this, still like basically a laser to 300, and that just a little more than a foot low at 400. So dropping just a little more than that 140, but they're very similar. It does drop off a little more at 500, but again, I'm not really worried. I'm not looking at past 400 with the way I set up a rifle, the way I hunt. So really, you start looking at these 140 and 160 and you're like, yeah, those are performing very similar, very similar. Now let's look at a real heavy hitter. Let's look at the 175, okay? So now I picked a Nosler partition. a little bit lower BC than that 160 AccuBond, but still a good BC, 519. I think I can start that at 2900, maybe a little more. So you start to look here at this load, again, carrying plenty of energy to 400, again, right around 2100. Very interesting to note, right around 2100, the same as the other two loads. And then out to 300, again, super flat, just dead hold on stuff, and just maybe an inch lower than that 160. Let's find that 160 here in all my little windows. 13.7, and this is 14.8, so an inch lower is all. So what I think is the most interesting about this, guys, is, look how there's not much difference between these three bullet weights, right? You guys can go back and pause the screen and look and compare, but it's shocking how 140, 160, 175, in the ranges that I hunt in, out to 400, they're all going to perform really similar. So where do I go with something like that? Where I go with that is to pick the load the rifle likes the best. The load that I'm getting the most consistent accuracy, consistency with, and maybe the load that fits the components I have, the types of powders, the primers, the brass, things like that. So that's just a little bit of how I'm going to approach this. And I have some of those components. I'm still gathering some up. In fact, I got to make a run right now and try to find a little bit of brass. I have a ton of factory ammo, and we could shoot those and make brass, but I kind of want some virgin brass to work with as well. All right, guys, hopefully this is all fun. I'm looking forward to it.